I'm Glenn Kiser. I'm the director of the Dolby Institute, and we're here at the Dolby Cinema at the Vine. This is an afternoon that we put together with AFI Fest to focus on Mary, Queen of Scots, and I'm so pleased to be welcoming Josie Rourke to talk about the film.
Thank you for welcoming me.
Congratulations again. What a magnificent, wonderful film. I definitely learned that it was very difficult for a woman to stay on the Scottish throne in the 16th century.
Yeah, really. I mean, you had to have an iron grip. That's one of the things about the movie where you go, what she endured simply to survive that. She needs all the credit in the world. You know, historically, Mary's often been characterized. There's a kind of fake news attempt in the archives by Cecil, who Guy Pearce plays in the movie, where they literally rearranged documents about her to make her look like she was inadequate or actually too sexual to be able to do her job properly. So a lot of what this movie is trying to do is put that back on track and tell this true story.
Too sexual to do her job properly. What?
Yeah, I mean, well, you'll have heard, actually, the woman in that scene in the church, all the Scots in there scream death to the whore, although Beau Willimon was like, they say her. I'm like, yeah, it's Scotland, they have to say her. But actually the woman who screams that is one of the most famous comedians in Scotland. But that is the history of Mary, that actually she is more defined by her relationships than she is by her working life as a queen. So she was much maligned, and you can read some historical accounts that say that she was this femme fatale who was implicated in the murder of Darnley that put her down for that, and that she was always in love with Bothwell and she just needed to blow up her husband in order that she could be with this man who she desired more. So that was a big part of that as well.
Well, so with all of that, you called it fake news. I thought that was a relatively new invention, but apparently it's not.
No. Well, politics was invented in the Renaissance as we understand it now. So that's the thing, isn't it?
Right.
You go actually so many ideas. So I don't know if anyone here is learned enough to have read Machiavelli's The Prince. But,
Sure.
when we call something Machiavellian, that was a textbook that was written in this period, published secretly. People would hand that around,
Right.
in kind of fake covers to make it look like something else so they could read how to manipulate people.
Well, so how do you get to the truth of what might have happened, or what, how important is the truth? I'm getting into a sort of a deep end of the pool here, but I'm curious about that and what relationship that would have had to the story that you wanted to tell. So
some elements of the very fine detail of history actually are not only important but are incredibly inspiring. This is a Dolby Atmos mix that you've heard in this theatre, and that's a great way to see and to hear the scene in the movie when Rizzio is brutally slaughtered. So we had to rebuild the sound entirely for that scene. That is, that's ADR, that's sound, that's everything. And we worked for hours and hours and hours with our amazing sound team to get that exactly right. And one of the reasons that we did is that historically, and you can go, if anyone's been, I don't know, to Holyrood, to Holyrood Palace in Edinburgh, to Mary's room, and you can go and stand in that room where 45 men charged into her room, ripped him from her arms and brutally slaughtered him. So I was saying to the team, I need 45 guys. And like, you won't fit them in here. That's crazy. What are you talking about? You've never directed a film before. I'm like, no, we've got to do that thing. And then you start to work on the sound mix, just to think about this auditorium you've heard it in. And, you're looking at incredible levels of detail where you go, let's hear all of those feet on the wooden floor. Let's hear them flock in. Let's hear that sort of awful, parasitical, terrible thing occur. And then when that knife goes to her pregnant belly, let's drop everything out. Let's have it be incredibly quiet. Let's really build up all the experiences in that scene, and then actually when it gets to a point of the brutality, let's drop the sound of those knives away and let's just hear people's breath. You can I'm completely, as you can probably tell, romantically engaged with this medium now, because you can do so much in that sense. But that's,
I was going to warm you up to questions about sound, but
sorry.
You just leapt right in.
Well, no,
Please
we're just
go.
chatting about it in the corridor, so it's in my head. But But that's incredible. And actually, I wouldn't have been inspired to do that scene that way had I not studied that history in detail. So it's both inspiring and incredibly important. I mean, there is one scene in this film that is an imagined scene, which is the scene when they meet.
Which is the big meeting, right? Which apparently never actually happened.
No. Although our historian unearthed in 2010 this amazing letter that showed, contrary to what people have said, that Elizabeth was still seeking reconciliation with Mary right up until very close to her executing her. So it's not this kind of, cat fight that people have been talking about for 450 years. It was much more nuanced and painful than that. And they needed that sisterhood because nobody else understood what it was like to be them. They were the only women doing that job on the island at that point.
Right.
You know, so there's lots of reasons to move away from history to do that scene, but also to express history. Like, there's a greater truth in that meeting, I think, and also a dramatic tradition in that meeting. So I have actually, I was thinking early today, I've directed a lot of very incredible actors who have played that scene, not in this movie, this is a new scene, but in on screen, or, you know, in there's a very famous German play. I just directed Janet McTeer. Do you know who Janet McTeer is? Amazing actor. You know, I directed her in Dangerous Liaisons, and she's played in that Schiller play opposite Dame Harriet Walter, playing that scene. Katharine Hepburn's played that scene. You know, Helen Mirren's played that scene. Yeah.
So you're obviously you're very well known and have had a tremendously successful career directing for the stage, and this is your first movie. Why this story, and why now for you?
Well, the why now is because this story feels incredibly now. So I hope you feel that it feels very fresh, that it feels like it's history speaking directly into our present. And I think one of my responsibilities as a storyteller, actually, if we're going to see really great change that we want in the world, is to tell better versions of our history as well as better versions of our present. So that was a big motivating force, and always has been in my work. I think if someone calls you up and says, we've got a project with Saoirse Ronan attached to it, I would definitely recommend that you do that. That's like,
just say yes at that point.
Yes, so that was it. And, you know, I was saying last night at AFI, gave my little introduction, that Saoirse has kept the faith with this film since she was 18 years old. She's now 24. So I came onto the project a couple of years ago, but she had wanted to tell Mary's story for a very, very long time. And that felt very, very significant to me, you know, because there are a lot of things that Saoirse Ronan can do and choose to do. And if she's holding that so close to her heart, then I was very moved by that, and that gave me a mission to want to make it with her.
That's great. So I wanted to kind of pursue this theme of, you know, your stage work and this being your first film. So when you're talking about sound, you basically got your three elements. You've got dialogue, and you've got sound effects, and you've got music as your basic elements of the sound. How are you using, I'm curious for you specifically, how are you using those three tools separately in film than you do on stage?
So I could talk about this for a long time, so you should just interrupt me if I go off on one. But firstly, with music, so what I would say about this score is that Max Richter is a composer, is a contemporary composer, not just as a great film composer that I've been obsessed with for a long time. And when I was thinking about this story, Bo was writing this screenplay, actually we were starting to think visually about the film. His music was music that I had on constantly in my house. So to be able to go to him and say, would you like to do this? And, you know, Max really only does what Max wants to do. He's a proper artist. And to have him connect with the project was huge. What he does in music, I don't know if anyone has ever listened to, there's an amazing piece of his which is called Vivaldi Recomposed. And what he does is takes one of the most famous pieces of music ever, which is Vivaldi's Four Seasons, and pulls it apart and reconstructs it. I would recommend a listen, like it's worth a listen. And what that does with something incredibly historic, which is to be intensely faithful, but to break it apart and reassemble it in a way that allows you to see it through the lens of the present, is what I wanted to do with this movie. So that was part of it. He also works very minimally. And although this score is very big at points, it also has actually, the orchestra we recorded with was a Wagnerian orchestra, so it was that big. So there's a lot going on symphonically, but it also has simplicity and minimalism to it in a way that's very helpful, I think. Yeah. So I'd say that about music. I'd also divide music into diegetic and non-diegetic. Is this getting too geeky?
No. I love that. Yeah, absolutely. I love that because you're right. You know, you used period appropriate music that was, you know, obviously one of the main characters is a you know, a music performer, and so that. There were moments when I was like, am I listening to score or is this, and then I would realize, no, it's him playing. Yeah. So I love that when that line gets blurred.
Yeah, and we also went on a mission to find actually one of the greatest violinists who's working in London at the moment, who's a guy called Balanescu, who's a Romanian violinist, who again is a great artist, actually a composer himself. And he and I sat down together and spoke a lot about the character of Rizzio in post. You know, and the musician in the film is murdered, right? So it's sort of the kind of murder of the musician is one of the emotional points of the film that's probably most crucial, and that's, I think, the closest they come to breaking Mary,
Right.
when they murder her best friend. And I said to Belasco, look, what we really need to do is to find the character, like look at what this actor's doing, like study him with me. I'm going to tell you about his performance, about what we're trying to do, so that when we go into the studio and you record those riffs that you see here, or you know, it's off camera and on camera as well in terms of what you hear, that actually it, I hope, heightens your sense of what's taken away, because it's very playful. You know, he's improvising a lot. When we first started to try and do it, people were being quite respectful with it when it was on set, and I was like, no, he'd just be messing about.
Right.
Like, just because it's period music, musicians like mess around.
And was the actor could he actually play?
He could play a little bit. He could definitely not play the lute, which is the hardest instrument to play, I think,
Right.
in the world. So no, he's mainly pretending.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so I just wanted to follow up through with that a little bit and talk with you about sound effects and sound design.
Yeah.
And what role does that have in your stage work? And then how did you take those learnings and apply them to the film?
So sound design in theatre has become a bigger and bigger element over the past decade, and in fact there's then it's not awards recognised, sound design in all of our theatre awards at the moment. There's been a big campaign over the past decades to have people recognise.
Quite controversially, it did have a Tony category, and then they took it away.
That's right.
And then now they brought it back.
Yeah,
right?
yeah. It's a kind of hot debate in theatre because of course what we don't have always is the incredible investment in technology. You know, what theatre's always done is kind of late adopted what cinema or music has pioneered. So, you know, we didn't have moving lights in theatre for quite a while, and you know, we know they were developed for rock concerts. So when we first tried to put them into theatres, the fans in them were too loud. You know, I assisted Sam Mendes on a show where they were put up and taken down over the course of the preview period because they made so much noise. So we tend to be late adopters on that kind of thing. That was a play I was assisting Sam on, not a movie. But sound design in theatre needs to work with the auditorium. And what you're trying to do in theatre always is to calibrate the room. So one of the reasons I'm capable of going on about this a lot is theatre directors, you think a lot about acoustics. Arguably, the primary job of a theatre director is to tell someone if they are loud enough. Like, we talk a lot about our craft and how we get great performance and the nuance of that, but we are also essentially the person at the back going, yeah, I can't hear you from row Z, you know? Like, and that's, and in England, unlike on Broadway, we don't mic the stage. Right. So we don't amplify actors' voices in order that big houses can hear them. You know, Simon Russell Beale, who is the guy who plays Beale, the name of the character in the movie, who reads the death warrant, is probably our greatest Shakespearean actor. And Simon can make himself heard to 1,000 seats, no problem. You know, I mean, he's a very great musician as well, actually. So what you're doing is you're tuning the room. So you come into a room and you go, how does this resonate? How does it work acoustically? And again, this is too technical. How absorbent is it? How reflective is it? Where are the kind of hot spots? How will an actor, you know, reach the top of the circle and not feel like they're shouting to the stalls? And then at the same time, you're working with your sound designer to try and create, normally from the stage, coming out to the audience, what the sound design for the production is. So we might put some speakers around, but there's nothing as sophisticated as this. So what I can't do is play hourly with the degree of nuance. I can make kind of quite broad and expressive strokes, and often a lot of theatre sound design now, certainly in England, is actually about expressionism more than it's about naturalism. You know? But what you can do in cinema, and why I got obsessed with this process, is that actually you can work in such detail with naturalism, it becomes expressive. Right. So, you know, you can turn the sound of those feet on the wooden floor in that murder into something that then takes on, very subtly, a quality where that whole group of men who's murdering him is like one beast. Right. You know? Right. And they're swarming. And you feel that, and you start to feel that, and then you push it a bit. And you see how far you can go. And I can't do that on stage in the same way.
Yeah. But isn't it amazing how far you can push it?
Oh, my God.
The audience, Walter Murch talks about this, the famous film editor and sound designer, very eloquently. And he says, you know, sound is the back door through which the audience takes information. And they are willing to go with you a lot farther than you think they might.
Yeah. And you know, when we finished the mix on this, we went for a pint we were mixing at Abbey Road, which was so cool. And we went for a pint at a pub down the road. And, you know, the team there said, you know, this is quite out there, actually. Like, this is quite a far, you know, this is quite an ambitious and quite an expressive piece of work for them. And I was like, is it? Sorry, I didn't realize. Oops. But we had a great time playing with that, and I love talking to them. And, you know, it also... one of my favourite bits of the sound design in the film is there's that one take in which they play that romantic scene in the Glen. So where she kind of falls for Darnley, like he does the poem and he's sort of cute, right? But then they go for a walk. He challenges her authority, and that's sort of a turn on to her, really, in a way. And so they walk through that Glen, and then they stop, and then he steps in toward her, and then he takes her face. And we did this thing where we were literally going, how far can we push the sound of the atmosphere in this Glen with all of, you know, the creatures of the forest, so that you really feel that, and that it sits in the right place underneath the score that Max wrote. But actually, when they stop moving and he comes towards her, just as he comes to stop, we drop the music out, which is weird because you go, this is the romantic moment, you should be turning up the music then, but we take it away. At that point, right? Yeah. And then as he touches her face, we basically turn down, we go one kind of loud bird, and then we turn down all of the birds in the Glen. Because, you know, that moment, like romantically, when you suddenly feel like everything goes quiet just before you're about to kiss someone for the first time. Maybe this is just me. Is this an overshare? Are you going to put this on the internet? You're going to put this on the internet, aren't you? Yeah, okay. So like, how do you get that feeling? And then as he moves away from her, all the organic and natural sound comes back into this naturalistic place. So you're working so subtly to do that, and that's so thrilling to me, right, that you can do that in this medium.
It's, you know, this is your first film, but this is a remarkably self-assured and sophisticated track and mix.
I never get called sophisticated. That's so cool.
You know, I'll geek out a little bit. There was some beautiful moments that I know. You know, I think when a lot of people hear, you know, a Dolby Atmos demo, and it's a very big, impressive sound system, and you can do lots of directional stuff and very, very big and powerful things. And obviously you use that very effectively in the battle sequence. It's a wonderful, you know, but that's, I think, what people expect it to do. There's that wonderful scene when Donnelly first meets her, and he's not sure, you know, which of the women is Mary, and he's going around, and I realized, you know, I realized that there was a sound of wind, a very subtle sound of wind in the overheads. And I thought, and I realized, like, these old stone castles were really drafty and cold.
Yeah, yeah.
And you guys were able to actually communicate that in a really magical way using this very directional sound system. And probably most people are not really aware of that.
No, that's right. And you know, another example of that, which I just loved, was in that incredibly brutal sex scene when he impregnates her. The first offer that the team made on that was the wind was whistling outside, and, you know, there was stuff rumbling, and it felt like, you know, there was something sort of melodramatic was going on. And I said, actually, I now understand what we can do with this mix. Just stop. Just have it be incredibly mundane. Like, can it just softly rain? Like, let's just remind people that actually this is a domestic act of violence, not an epic one, even though it results in the, you know, the creation of James I of England and Scotland. Like, just let it be regular, boring rain outside. And we did that with every scene. We were like, what's the weather like today? When we looked at every interior. And that was really cool.
That's great. But there's just remarkably subtle stuff. I'm also thinking you also have a really great use of dynamic range. And you mentioned it in passing just a few moments ago with silence. Yeah. There's a sequence, and I'm apologize. I didn't make note of the character's name, but her captive guard that she marries subsequently after.
Yeah. Yes. Lord Bothwell. Yeah.
The scene where he, you know, basically rapes her, and you go in for those tight close-ups. And you took the sound almost completely out.
It's completely gone.
And you're just looking at their eyes, and you're not even hearing their breath. And it was such an eerie moment. It was just beautiful, and it's just fantastic design.
Yeah, and we didn't get there until the very end of our process with that. So we all had an instinct to do it, and we kept trying stuff. Like, we had a sort of high tone, and it actually wasn't until we'd done pretty much everything else in the movie, you know, and we sort of got to the point of kind of real checking, really, with it, that we were just like, let's do it. Like, we dared ourselves to do it. and we took it out and actually we watched it in context. So I think that's also what you're saying, that we watched it in context of everything else we'd done, and we were like, yeah, that holds. Their acting is so incredible. We can dare to do that thing. And again, the only other place really that happens is it goes incredibly quiet, not fully quiet, just before the movie ends with that breath that then takes into silence with those cards.
Yeah, it's fantastic work, and obviously you also, you have a lot of great production design that I think opened up a lot of fantastic possibilities for sound. These immense stone rooms just give you so much possibility for. There was that great moment with Elizabeth when she finally loses patience with her, her privy court, and she stands up, and then all of the chairs scrape on the stone floor, and it was just a beautiful, really powerful sound moment there.
Yeah, it's a cool sound, that, isn't it? And it's actually kind of sort of weirdly, I love that because that's a sound that you know from school. Do you know what I mean? That's a sound, isn't that right? Like the bell goes and all the class goes like that.
Yeah.
And so I am also like, I drive them crazy because I think that I can Foley stuff. So I am that annoying director who's there in the mix going, kind of a sound, and like, Josie, just stop, use your words, please stop. But yeah, and that room is in the Bodleian Library in Oxford University. That is a 600-year-old stone room.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Wow. So I'm a little curious about your process, and obviously you were sort of learning as you were doing this, and you obviously worked with
a very expensive film school.
Yeah, well, if somebody else is going to pay for it, why not? So directors handle sound in different ways. There are some directors who, I've worked with directors who come every third day of the mix for a playback and give notes, and they take off. And then there are other directors who are on stage at every moment of every day. How did you engage with your sound team, and how did you establish that relationship with them and tell them what you needed and sort of guide them through the process?
Yeah, so I mean, I think that that for me probably was one of the bits of the process that came most readily from theatre, because specifically we think about the spoken word so much, and for us so much information, even visual information, travels through the poetry of the spoken word. Obviously theatre is a highly visual medium, but it's also a highly verbal one. So one of the things for me was to be and also the other thing about this movie is, just thinking about this in terms of dialogue, is that there are 5 languages spoken in this film. And that's and there are, I would say, there's a funny thing, like the English are speaking with what we call an RP accent, so that's one we're most familiar with because that's our kind of sort of BBC accent. To an extent that's changing, but there's the Scottish accent as well. So how we're dealing with that, and also just that checking in, going, do we think we have it, do we think we have the clarity? And that's a very sensitive thing as well, because what you don't want an actor to feel is that actors hate doing ADR. Like, they hate it. And I understand why. Like, because there's something slightly cruel about an ADR session where you don't soften them up at the beginning. You kind of, they come in, you stick a pair of cans at them, you go, like that, which is not what they're used to at all. And they made it ages ago, and they can see themselves and and all of that. So just learning where to find the sensitivity around performance and capture in that process, and actually guiding people through the ADR process. And that was really cool. And actually the ADR team was saying that they were enjoying it because I was using a lot of my theatre director skills in the ADR sessions. So what we're quite good at is targeting very specifically with a note. So if you need a particular thing on one line, like in theory, I've got the skill to be able to go, here's the thing you need in your head to be able to do that. So that was good fun.
I hate to break it to you, but most directors hate ADR so much. I've actually worked with a number of directors who don't even come to the ADR.
Don't they?
It's shocking. Yeah, sometimes the poor actors are just left on their own to revoice their lines.
How do they? I don't understand that.
I don't know. It's I don't think it's the best way of working, certainly. At what point did this become a Dolby Atmos mix? Was that always part of the concept for the sound from the beginning?
Yeah, quite early on. So I found out about it, and I went to see, what did I go and see? I think I went to see not the most recent Star Wars, the one before that. That was the one that was running in, there's a really nice cinema opened up, a Picture House Central, which is just a great cinema, and it's got a Dolby Atmos in, so I went in and was really impressed. So yeah, I was like, can we use it?
Let's open up and take some questions from the audience. Does anybody have any questions for Josie? Yeah. So so just for the sake of the video, the question was about obviously you'd done a lot of work with Sam Mendes. Was he a mentor to you in this process, and how did that your sort of transition into the film medium?
So Sam has been a career-long mentor to me. So I run a theatre called the Donmar Warehouse in London, which Sam founded in its modern incarnation. And in the year 2000, I was appointed Sam's assistant director on a scheme that we have. We have a resident assistant director scheme where we get someone who's at the beginning of their career and they come and spend 12 months and assist all of the directors, but also work closely with the artistic director to understand what that role is. And I was that person for Sam for 2003, 2001. And then Sam gave me my first professional theatre gig, which was on the Donmar Warehouse stage. So Sam's always been a mentor and an inspiration, and yeah, we definitely chatted about this. I also, so that was 2000. So he actually, I remember I'd been working at the Donmar 2 weeks when he won the Oscar and thanked everyone working at the Donmar Warehouse. And I was like, I've been here a fortnight, that's me. So yeah, that's always been a part of it. And, I'm sure it's the case here in this city, but the theatre in London and the London theatre community is incredibly great and generous at mentoring, and people give back a lot and see that as part of their role because, they really care about the craft of theatre. And I think what I felt with a number of directors, Phyllida Lloyd, who directed Iron Lady, is one of our associate directors at the Donmar. So she was really, really helpful at steering me through, and there are a number of people, yeah.
Great. Other questions? Yeah, right behind the camera. No, the question was there's a lot of diversity in the cast, and also a very progressive attitude about homosexuality in the film. And is there a historical basis for that, or was that sort of kind of an imagining of what could have been?
So, in terms of the diversity in the cast and the amazing actors of colour in there, I said to Focus and to Working Title at the very beginning of this process, and they were very supportive of this, that I would not make a period drama with an all-white cast. So, that's really that. Your question about sexuality is actually a really interesting question, and tells us, a bit like I was saying before, as much about the present as I think it does about the past, a bit like the movie. So it is a misconception that people were not tolerant of what we now call homosexuality and bisexuality in the Renaissance. So there were hardly any prosecutions for homosexuality during that period. It was not illegal. What was illegal was, sorry, I'm going to go deep into this. What was illegal was sodomy. And in the film, someone called, Lennox, Darnley's father, calls him a sodomite.
Calls his own son a sodomite, yeah.
However, there were very few prosecutions for sodomy. And if they got you for sodomy, they were sort of trying to get you for something else. It's a bit like getting Al Capone for tax. Yeah. That was sort of the view of it. And of course, this is the period in which William Shakespeare was writing. Most academics think that he wrote his sonnets to a man, not to a woman. Those, some of the greatest love poems ever written. It seems to me this is a really important moment in our history to remember that progress is not linear, that it is possible to go backwards as much as it is to go forwards. So it's a really great question, and I'm grateful to have the opportunity to say, actually, yes, there was what we would think of as more tolerance then. Also, we know that Darnley was bisexual. We know that he had a relationship with Rizzio. We know that Rizzio was most probably gay, and that's, factually recorded. They actually called him, in the court of Mary Queen of Scots, Lord Henry Darnley, the great cock chick, if that gives you an indication of what people thought about his sexual proclivities.
Fantastic. More questions? Yeah, right here. So it's a question about your transition from stage directing to film directing, and what came easiest to you, and what was the biggest challenge, and how did you prepare yourself?
Okay, so as we were saying before, I had these amazing mentors, and actually Walter Murch's book was something that I read and reread a lot through the process. I'm going to say something that might come across the wrong way. There is a surprising amount on YouTube. Like, if you want to direct a movie, like there's a lot there. I mean, I'm serious. And
it's amazingly true.
yeah, like amazing directors' commentaries, like just really great, simple breaking down tutorial stuff on how things work. So I was running my theatre, but I spent most of my weekends watching YouTube videos for quite a while, just, and actually, stuff like this, like we're doing now, which is listen to a director talk about their filmmaking and how that worked. Like, I found that intensely valuable, and then doing that and then rewatching films. I did that thing that people tell you to do, which is to watch a movie with the sound off, probably sacrilegious in here, but to think about the camera. Yeah.
No, it's about shifting your focus and paying attention to different aspects. What's different about working with actors, directing actors for stage versus film? I would imagine in theater you have a very lengthy rehearsal process. Did you use that in the film as well?
Yeah, we had 2 weeks rehearsal, which was something actually that Working Title understood from the start would be a part of my process. And I think that one of the things that they really valued and were excited about is, I hope, my ability as a theatre director to help people do great performances. And what's true about this story is that the majority of the leading characters are incredibly young. So they're in their 20s, most of those actors, which is remarkable if you think about the complexity of what they're playing. And there is a thing I found, one of the things that an actor acquires with experience is actually knowing, this is very specific, knowing how to wear clothes. So like, I've worked with Judi Dench and Helen Mirren and acts like that. And the thing that those women know how to do is how to wear a dress and not have the dress wear them. Janet McTeer is unbelievable at that to talk about.
Sure, yeah.
And you just, although you do a bit of that as you train, an actor is not necessarily taught that. So you can be thrown into the Renaissance and you've never acted in that period before in your life, So I work very specifically in rehearsal, both with myself as a theatre director, but also an amazing choreographer called Wayne McGregor, who is a resident choreographer at the Royal Ballet and actually works in all the Harry Potter films and is amazing at putting an actor into their body and also getting them to not fear their clothes and fear the period and work out how to be natural. So, for example, Saoirse really wanted to work out how she could do what I'm doing now, which is to be asymmetrical in a very formal gown. Like, can I cross my legs? Can I lean like this? Can I do that? Whereas Margot, you'll see, is incredibly, and this is sort of aesthetic choice, presentational. It's very symmetrical, everything. So, think techniques like that, just sort of understanding how to do that and open up that language. That was a big part of it. And then also for me, the close-up. There are a lot of close-ups in this movie, and that I think partly is because you spend your life as a theatre director in a rehearsal room. And you see things in a rehearsal room, like, I'm here, you're there. I'm closer sometimes. You do a piece of acting, and I know that what you just did, what came across your face, I could not show to this room. Like, I have to work out how to translate that so that a whole room can feel it. Whereas if I've got a camera, I can just show it to the world. So I feel like, for me, it's like a gift of 10 years, 15 years in the theatre, seeing this stuff that I can now show people.
That's a great way of expressing it. I sense a certain amount of excitement on your part. I feel like you might make more films.
Hope so.
Any more questions? Yeah, right here. Sorry, you were over in the corner. Yeah.
You also, I think, in that amazing hair and makeup in that moment feel... So you have 2 things, don't you? You have this tingling feeling because you start to recognise Elizabeth I as she's generally presented. Images, you see the beginning of that thing. But the other thing that you see, I think, speaking as a woman, is how... makeup is sometimes a key to the amount of vulnerability that you're feeling. So the mask of that thing, or just on a really basic level, I am very jet lagged and I'm wearing a lot of cover up. I mean, I actually, and actually it's because I want to come and say hi and not look like I'm tired and all of those things. But, so what you feel after she has the pox is also her huge humanity in that, like how we try and make ourselves feel strong enough to walk into big moments in our life. And I think Jenny Sherkor, who did the makeup, really love that. Can I have you one takeaway, which is just so cool if you've seen the movie, which is that apart from the final 3 looks when Elizabeth is coming down the corridor at the end of the film, all of the costumes are made of denim.
Denim?
Yeah.
And is that was that historical? Historic? You did that. You did that. You did that for sound, so that you didn't. The costumes were not too loud. I don't know why.
Well, actually, it was
denim?
very helpful. Oh my! Like those scenes in the beds, which is like being trapped in a drapery department. But in the sound mix, I'm like, oh. And it's really annoying because you've recorded these really intimate scenes, and then you have to ADR them because like you can hear. I know. Okay. Well, I learned something there, but it's a number of reasons. So you've got in Alex Byrne, who designed the costumes, this artist who is incredibly confident in the Renaissance. She obviously designed the Elizabeth Kate Blanchett film, so she knows this time. That's worked with Kenneth Branagh a lot. She has the confidence to be able to go, and she's quite like a sound thing. Here's one dynamic range that we're going to fix. Like here's one thing that we're going to do that will give us unity, so that creativity comes in other places. So you have enormous control of the palette, and also actually, yes, in sound terms, enormous control of how that fabric moves, because you have one fabric that's moving a certain way. So when you come down that corridor as Elizabeth and see that Mexican wave of men, actually there's something about the fact that they're all in that same fabric that gives you a bit that feeling of that sea of bodies. That's really cool. The other thing is, so men, again, to go back to how actors feel, like it's really hard to act in tights, as we would say in England, in like stockings. And this period was all about the male leg. So historically, accurately, they would have been wearing actually like little sort of micro minis, and their legs would have been. And you'll have seen that in movies, right? And it's just really hard. Like not all men have great legs, you know. So we didn't want to expose them. Like they wanted them to feel strong and confident. So that was a good way to do that.
That's fantastic. Well, Josie, thank you so much for taking the time to talk to us about the film.
Lovely to meet you all. Thanks.
This has been a lot of fun. Thanks, everyone. The movie comes out December 7th. December 7th in the U.S. Please tell all of your friends and go see it again.
Thank you.